Hi, we're glad you could join us again for another edition of the InTouch Machine Edition training video series. Today we're going to cover formatting and shapes, and we're going to understand how to use shapes, the basic shapes within InTouch Machine Edition, and how to format those on screen. When you're finished, you should be able to use the shapes, combine shapes, and understand how to position and align and just in general format. Understanding layering objects using object ID and selecting an object by the object ID. Today's video agenda, we're going to basically go through and draw all the different static shapes that you can draw, understand how to align, distribute, and layer those. We'll talk a bit about tab order, selecting multiple objects and deselecting individual objects once you've selected multiple, and using multiple objects to create a look, if you will, or another object out of that. So let's go ahead and get started. What we're going to do is bring the InTouch Machine Edition editor in here. Now this is the project that I started in the previous video called Screen Groups. If you haven't done that video, please go back and do that and follow along and build this project, because we're going to need to have this structure here in place to have multiple screens of the navigation, the header, and the main. Because what we're going to do here is we're going to open up the main screen and place these objects and build on what we've done in the previous video and continue on. So I'm looking at the shapes group here under the graphics tab. Now mine, because I have reduced resolution because I'm recording in a reduced resolution, I don't have the text next to these shapes in the ribbon here. You probably will have those depending on your resolution, but that's why you don't see that. I'm going to choose a line first here, and when you choose a line, you basically single click and release on that object or that shape, and then I can see my cursor has changed to this kind of large plus sign. And then when I go into my screen area, I can single click, and that will set that starting point. And notice that it kind of forces me to have either a horizontal line or a vertical line. I can't get a diagonal line in there. But once I then single click again, that will drop that endpoint, and then I can change this to be a diagonal line if I want to or need to. I can sometimes, depending on how my view is set up, maybe I might have a hard time to select that. Normally you would select a shape by clicking on it or double clicking on it to get to the properties. Sometimes you might not be able to double click on that. So one of the things you can do with shapes or multiple shapes is you can window around them to select an object. And if you can't get it to double click, you can always hold down the Alt and Enter on your keyboard, and that will bring up the properties. Very similar to if I right click on an object. See, I'm having a hard time here. If I right click on it, you can see here it says Alt and Enter to get to the properties. So that's a method to do that. Once I have an object properties open, you can see that I have different choices of line widths and colors and things of that nature. And just to note that if you choose a dashed line type, that you can't change its weight. It is only a weight of 1, but you can with a solid color. So that's line. Let's go now to drawing a polyline. Now a polyline, there's a couple of different ways to draw this, and what you might do is single click and release to start that first vertice, and then position where you want your second vertice or corner to be, and then just click and release as you want corner points there. Now to end, there's a couple of different options. You can double click, or what I prefer is to right click, because that kind of prevents you from accidentally getting double points there at the end. And depending on what you want in your shape, that may or may not be advantageous. So drawing in this way gives you the corner points. There is an alternative way to draw, which is hold down the mouse button, and when you do that, you can see that you can draw curves and shapes, but really what it's doing is it's placing a bunch of lines with a bunch of different corner points there, or vertices on that. Now, when you have a polygon, open or closed polygon, we cannot add or remove points, but you can modify where those points are located. There is no add or remove vertices or corner points. Unfortunately, you have to start over. One of the things that I found handy is if I draw an object and I don't get it the way that I want it, but I'm close, maybe I leave that object on the screen and then I just kind of trace over the top of it with a new object and get everything that the way that I wanted it. So maybe I didn't want that point there and I wanted to go directly here. I can right click and then I can go back and I can delete that other object. So sometimes tracing over the top of it, if you screw up, it kind of helps you. The next object here is the closed polygon, and I'm going to do something similar where I'm going to draw just choosing the vertices here, and I'm going to draw a shape because specific shape because later on I'm going to show you some different ideas and tools on how to do this, and I'm not going to get it perfect just to save some time here. So a couple notes about the closed polygon. Under properties here, you also have the ability to fill or no fill, so it could be either kind of transparent or filled, and change its color there. Unlike the open polygon, you don't have that choice. Now the open polygon and the closed polygon are really two different shapes. You can't change between them. You can't say, okay, I have an open polygon, I want to convert it into a closed polygon. It doesn't work that way. It's a separate shape. Even if you were to try to move the endpoints together, let's say, oh, that looks like a closed polygon, but you won't get the background fill option here. So if you've done it in one versus the other, you have to delete the object and draw it in the one that you do want. Now rectangles, here we can draw a rectangle, and you can draw that kind of vertically. Maybe you want a bar graph, you can draw it horizontally, and we'll talk about making pipes a little bit later on. But basically you draw a rectangle, and we don't have a square object because you can make a square out of a rectangle, and let's talk a little bit about that in a minute as far as formatting goes. Within the rectangle object, if I take a look at the properties, we do have this additional button here called Caption, and that allows you to put text. And when I type in text, it appears, let's close this and move this, it appears in that rectangle. And we did this on the header screen. We put that status up at the top here, and we embedded tag names inside of curly brackets and a built-in scripting function inside of curly brackets. So we've already been exposed a little bit to this. Now, some of the active objects to put text on the screen is one way to put text on this screen. Sometimes, and you'll see this throughout the remaining videos, sometimes what I do, especially when I need multiple lines or maybe large blocks of text, what I'll do is I'll use a rectangle, and I'm just going to copy this here. I'll talk about copying that in a second. What I'll do sometimes is remove the border and remove the fill, and so that gives me kind of a placeholder to have a piece of text, and especially if I have multiple lines, sometimes that's easier to do it that way. So let's go back and talk briefly about what I did. You can right click on an object and then cut, copy, and paste. Alternatively, you can use Control-C, Control-V, things of that nature, as you're probably used to. If I do a Control-C and a Control-V, you can see it pops up here in the corner, and then I can position it accordingly. But what I did when I copied this object a minute ago, once I have it selected, I can hold down the Control key and drag a copy of it off, and that's kind of a very quick and easy way to create multiple objects or copies of the same object. So that's a way to do that. Okay, so let's see. We took a look at the caption field. You already know that you can change the text within that, but you can also change the alignment and the font and the colors and things of that nature in there as well. And we'll do that a little bit later on when we kind of layer multiple objects on top of each other. The next object that I wanted to talk about, yeah, we'll talk about formatting in a second. The next object is the rounded rectangle. Now this is basically a rectangle with rounded corners, which you've probably seen in other graphics packages, but this is a little unique as far as how you change the radius of that corner. We have an extra handle here, this little corner point, if you will. We have an extra one, and that sets up the radius point of where that corner kind of radius is around. So it takes from that particular handle and rotates or rounds the corner around that, so you can change the roundedness, if you will. And towards the end of this video, we're going to actually build some tanks and pipes by using this concept. Another thing that I've done is taken a rectangle and put it a rounded rectangle on top of this in a similar size, let's say, and then be able to change its color, let's say, and create some interesting framing and maybe templates and symbols where I might have a label up at the top and a value down here. So some different ways to do that. The rounded rectangle, even though it has a grayed out caption button here, I think we reused the rectangle properties box and we just grayed this out. Even though it's there, there's no way to turn on the caption field in a rounded rectangle. I'm guessing at this point that it's because that you could accidentally put the radius in here too much and have the text spill off the edge. But at this point, no matter what you choose, you can't get a caption in a rounded rectangle. What you could do is that same technique that I used up here, which would be to put a rectangle and turn off its border, turn off its fill, and then put this on top of the other object. Let me move this to the front here. And that would be a way that you could get text on a rounded rectangle, but it is a separate object at that point. Moving along to the ellipse. Here we can draw an ellipse, and depending on what part of the world you're in, this might look like an American football or a rugby ball, but we can get circles out of this and different orientations on this. And if I double click on this, you can see that I can also change its border color and its background colors as well. So that's the basic shapes that are here. There is one kind of additional shape that I want to talk about, which is really just a graphic object. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring Microsoft Paint into view here, and you could use other graphics packages for this too. What I'm going to do is click maybe a green color here, and I want to choose shapes, pre-built shapes. I'm just going to choose a lightning bolt to simulate, we'll call this green energy here. And then maybe what I'll do is I will select this, and I'm not trying to teach you how to use Paint, but to show you what might be relevant in other graphics packages. I'll select everything here, or maybe I can, yeah, we'll just select everything. And then I can hit the copy icon here, and then go back to InTouch Machine Edition, and then right click and paste, or paste in here. And now I have this graphic. Now we kind of did something similar when we did the logo up on the header, but I want to talk a little bit more about this. Now this will place this automatically in the web resources folder of your project, and this will give you a checksum. Now this checksum, basically it's looked at every bit in this this graphic and checksum this. So if you place additional bitmaps that are exactly the same, it can compare those and know not to place additional ones. It references that same file. Another thing would be to talk about the transparent color. Here I'm going to use the tracker, or the little handle here, this extra little handle, to choose the transparent color. Now before I did that, it had, so if I say none, it had this white rectangle around it. If I choose a tracker, I can choose move this over a particular color. You can see now that that's transparent where I have chosen that green color, or I can make the white kind of background transparent as well. Alternatively, and we'll talk about this when we get into some of the animations and changing colors, you can choose a color code and put in a value in here, either a tag, a constant, or an expression that evaluates to a color that can then make that particular color transparent as well. So that's kind of one additional shape that you have that's not listed here, is pasted. We'll talk about in additional videos later on how to do linked pictures, background graphics, and other methods that you can get graphics on the screen. But those are the basics of the shapes. Now let's talk a little bit about alignment and formatting and things of that nature. let me draw a couple of objects on the screen here. I'm going to draw a triangle. Not perfect by any means. I'm going to go to the properties and I'm going to fill that in, and then I'll draw an ellipse. But I maybe want this ellipse to be a perfect circle. So how can I do that? There's a few different ways. I can go here into the Format tab and change the height and the width. Maybe I want that to be 64 pixels, and maybe I know that, maybe I don't know that. I can use my mouse to kind of get it close and then say, oh, that's about 64 pixels. I can go ahead and put that in there, and then it'll make a perfect circle out of that. Alternatively, there's another way to do this. I can use the Format tab. I can use this resize. And if I click on this button as it is, it will resize this object to have the same height and the same width. So it will, again, make that a perfect circle. I can choose multiple objects, and the way that you choose multiple objects within InTouch Machine Edition is to hold down the Shift key. So I can select, let's say, this triangle and this other ellipse. So now I have all three of those objects selected. I can then go back up here to the Format, Resize, and I could make all of those the same size. Or alternatively, I can pull this drop down and say I want all of these to be the same height. And notice that the triangle changed height there. Or I can say I want all these to be the same width, and they'll all be the same width. Now that's referencing the last one that I chose, which is the one that has darker handles here. And in a similar fashion, in fact, let me get rid of this and draw a square or something rectangular anyway to talk about alignment. If I choose multiple objects, and there's several different ways to do that, I can hold down the Shift key and then click on the objects that I want to select. And they don't have to be right next to each other. For example, I can click on this open polygon way over here too. Alternatively, I can window around the objects that I want, and I would need to completely encompass the objects that I want to select. So in this case, I have those three objects in my window, and I've selected those. What I mean by completely encompass, if I choose here not to fully go over the rectangle, you can see how a little bit of it is hanging out of the window. That does not get selected in the group. And you can use that to your advantage depending on how you have objects and things layered, maybe things behind each other. I can use that to my advantage to get to some of the objects. So for example, that triangle does not go all the way down to the bottom of that rectangle, so I can choose that even though it's behind. So let's get back into talking about alignment. For example, if I want to align to the left, and this is something a little bit unique about InTouch Machine Edition. If I want to align these to the left, I can select these objects. Notice that the last one that I selected has the darker handles on it, the darker trackers. That means that it's the reference object. And if I go up to Format, Align, Align to the left, it will align to that reference object. So you can see how those moved there. Now we do have an undo. You can hit Control and Z or Control Z, and alternatively I can select objects in a different order. In this case, the objects will align to the left of the rectangle. Now, this is a little bit different than some drawing packages because they maybe all will align to the leftmost object. Well, that's not the case. You get to choose which one is your reference. So if I do that same align to the left, now I have the rectangle, and when I click on this, you'll see that those align to that object. Now, again, I'm going to undo this. Let's say that I've selected multiple objects, and I want to deselect one of those or several of those. I can hold down the Shift key on my keyboard and then double-click the object that I want to remove from the selection, and so that triangle is no longer part of the selection. Now if I do an align, you can see that that is not part of the selection. So that can be helpful for managing graphics on this screen. Let's see, let's talk a little bit about some other formatting things. You can directly position objects. Let's say I want this triangle to be maybe over here at, let's say 2020. We'll position it over here and then 20. So I can directly position that by typing those in. I can use my up and down arrows in these formats to position the object and get very precise pixel resolution here on where I want to position the object, or I can use my mouse and move it around as well. Alternatively, you can hold, once you select an object, you can hold the Shift key down on your keyboard and use the arrow keys on your keyboard. So I'm holding Shift and moving my arrow keys, or typing my arrow keys and moving an object. And if I have the Snap to turned on my grid, and I do this, it moves at a grid by grid resolution. If I right click on the background of the screen and go to grid settings and turn off my Snap to, and I do that same thing where I have an object selected, hold down the Shift key and then move my arrow keys, it's moving 1 pixel at a time. So there are several different ways to format and change the position. I can also change width and height of objects, and maybe this is a little bit more relevant to show on say a rectangle or an ellipse. So there's some different ways to do those as well. So another thing that I want to talk about here is alignment, or layering, I should say. So the order that I drew these in, or maybe change these, you can see right now that that triangle is actually behind the ellipse and the rectangle. That triangle, if you look down here in the status bar, it has an object ID of 9, where this is 10 and this is 11. So I know in order the layer is this this ID number is kind of a Z layer, or back to front layer. The very first object that I drew on the screen was this line, so you can see that's ID 0. And I think this rectangle was maybe in front of everything else, so you can see that how this layering works. Now you can change the layering. For example, if I want to move this to the front of everything else, I can use this bring to front or send to back, let's say. In this case, I'm going to bring it to the front here, and now it changes that ID. Now it's number 11, and it's reordered the other objects. So now it's in front of everything else. And alternatively, I can send that to the back and push it behind everything else. So now it's behind everything else on the screen. And alternatively, we have bring forward 1 and send to back by 1. So right now it's behind everything, and you can see that the line goes over that. If I bring this forward by 1, now it's in front of the line. It should be ID number 1, since it was ID 0 and I moved it forward by 1 layer. It's in front of the line, but it's still behind everything else on the screen. Alternatively, I can right click and use those same things, but notice here that I can use the control and number pad plus sign, control and then number pad minus sign, and it will change the order of those as well. Now, notice that if I want to get to the properties, what I'll do in a lot of the times when I'm developing, I will double click and to get to the properties. But there might be times where you have an object that is maybe behind or not convenient to get to, and maybe you know that that object in this case is ID 1, let's say, and it's behind there. I'm going to leave just a little bit of it poking out so that you can see it right there. Now, if I know that that object in this case is ID 1, or I know there's an object, there's a few different ways that I can select that. I can select maybe by not completely encompassing the rectangle, and I can choose that object. That object is selected. You can see here it's ID 1. Alternatively, if I want to select that object, I can go here to the Graphics tab. If I know its ID, I can pull down this selection drop down and say Go To, and then type in the number of the object, and it will select that object here. You can see it's ID 1. Now, how do I double click on it? Well, I can't double click on it, but if you notice that when you right click on an object to get to the properties, it says Alt and Enter works the same here. So if I want to get to that object, I can put in a 1 here, click on OK. I have that selected. Now I can hit Alt and Enter on my keyboard, and it'll pull up that closed polygon or that triangle's property. So that's a way that you can get to an object if it's layered behind something. And there will be times as you're building different graphics and different looks for your project that you'll build different layers and maybe hide objects behind other objects, so that will come into play. Maybe change the visibility of this rectangle, so it disappears during runtime and exposes that. But so that's a way that you can get to that. Let's talk a bit about the let's see. Oh, I want to choose this object. I specifically drew this object in kind of a house shape format to illustrate some of the rotation. We can rotate at 90 degrees at a time. There is no free rotate in the development. There's no, I can't rotate it in let's say degree increments or 5-degree increments. I can either go in 90-degree increments. In this case, it's upside down, or I can go flip horizontal and flip vertical, which is 180 degrees. So I can flip that back up. You can rotate objects during runtime and by individual degrees or even fractions of degrees in certain circumstances. That's a way to do that. Let's see. What else did I want to cover? Show that. Corners. When you select an object, and this is very easy to understand with a rectangle, here I can see the X and Y position, which is the upper left-hand corner of the object, and then I can also see the height and the width down here in the status bar. Alternatively, I can click on Format, and it'll show me those same numbers here, and I can modify those. So for example, I can move this object up here in the upper corner, and that should show me that it's at 0, 0, and it'll show me the height and the width. For other objects, it may not be so intuitive. The upper corner of a closed polygon, for example, is kind of the bounding box that would encompass this. So 0, 0, or the position of this object happens to be right up here in space. It's the top part of this object, the leftmost part of this object, and where that point is, that 0, 0 point is right here. So that 599, 258 is right in this general area. So it's not the leftmost or the topmost. It's kind of the point off to that. And I can illustrate this, and I normally wouldn't do this, but I can right click and I can group this object just to get that bounding box to appear. So that position is right there. Now normally you wouldn't group an individual object, but just to show you that position. That's why I wanted to do that. Let's see here. Talked about that. Talked about resizing, rounded, copy and paste. Another thing that you can do when you're formatting a screen. Personally, I like to cosmetically draw the screen first and then kind of configure it. And once I get everything aligned and positioned just the way that I want it, then what I will often do, or a feature that we have here under the Graphics tab, is this Disable Drag. Notice that the tooltip floating there says Control D. If I turn on Disable Drag, and you can see that that's highlighted, it also puts down in here in the status bar No Drag. At this point, I can select objects, but I can't move them. I'm trying to drag them with my mouse. I can't accidentally move them on the screen, so you can't nudge those. But you can still double click on them and get to their properties. So that's kind of a convenience mechanism to lock those down. Now that does get saved on a screen-by-screen basis, so once you get a screen drawn, you can lock that down. And it's easily reversible. I can just disable drag or undisable drag here, and again, Control D, which I'm hitting on my keyboard, will allow me to turn that on and turn that off. So if you come across a screen that somebody else has developed and you can't move objects, hitting Control D will turn that off and undisable the drag so that you can then move objects around. Now another thing that I want to show you is talking about the layering and the ordering, let's say, of text. We'll talk a bit about this when we get into text, but I wanted to show you, let's say for example I had some data entry points here, and maybe I had 4 different data entry points. The text data link, as I try to use these objects, as I would tab between them, it would go normally in the order that I created them in. But if I wanted to change the tab order, I can right click on the background of the screen, not on an object. So if you have an object selected and you right click, it won't show you this menu that I'm about to show you. You have to right click on the background of the screen, and then you can choose the tab order. That will set the tab order for objects being entered So in this case, if I wanted to go from this object to this object, this will go in this order. If I want to change that order, let's say maybe I want to go from this object, I want to go instead of top down, then left to right, maybe I wanted to go left to right, then top down. I can select this object, select this object, select that, and that will set that order. And notice the other ones are changing their order as well. Alternatively, if you want to directly set the tab order, you can double click on it, and maybe I want this one to be number 7. Let's say I can directly enter that. And if you have a group of objects, and I can't group this because I'm still in the tab order selection, so I have to turn that off, I can group. And then once I have a group, if I set the tab order, what you'll see is that I have kind of subgroups here. I have 13.1, 0.2, 0.3, and 0.4, and I can change those within the order. Let's go in this order here maybe. So that's some formatting of tab order. Oh, let's see. Another feature that we have, let me go ahead and turn off the tab order, is if you have objects that have similar properties. So for example, this is a rectangle, but I've turned off the border and the fill. This is also a rectangle. If I select both of those and I go into my properties, well, if I double click this object, this will select that object here, but deselect the other object. So I want to select multiple of these, and I'm going to use the Alt and Enter to go into my properties. Notice here that it says multiple. Now what I can do is I can change this common properties simultaneously. Changed. And now when I click on OK, you can see that it changed both of those. Or maybe I want to change the fill color on those. You can see that it changes them simultaneously. So in a similar fashion, let's say that I choose two objects that are not the same type, in this case a rectangle and a circle, but they do have common properties. Again, I'm going to hit Alt and Enter on my keyboard. So now I have a little bit different properties box here. This says multiple objects, and then the kind of shared properties are shown here. So I can change fill color, the border, things of that nature, so I can get at those simultaneously. Let's see, talked a little bit about the status bar and the positioning here, the alignment. Oh, one of the things I didn't talk about is alignment. Let's I'm going to change this ellipse into a circle, let's say, and then maybe copy this and then reduce it. In this case, maybe from 64, I'll go down to 54 by 54, so reduce that by 10 pixels. And now maybe I want to align those to draw maybe a nice button or something. So what I can do is I can use this Arrange here in the Graphics tab, or I can go to the Format and do Align, Align Center this way, Align Middle, and get those perfectly lined up. So that's one way that I can use that tool. Another thing that I can do is, let's say that I wanted to draw buttons across the bottom of the screen. Maybe I had an HMI that had 10 buttons across the bottom. Here's what I might do for that. Draw buttons or rectangles, whatever the case may be. And what I might do is figure out, okay, my screen is this wide, divide that by 10, so I need my buttons to be this big. And then draw one button and then configure it, and it might be best to configure the buttons before you make copies of them. That'll speed up your development. What I'm about to show you is how to distribute objects evenly. So I'm going to hold down the Control key, and once I do that, I can copy that object. Now I just realized that I don't have the grid turned on, so I'm going to turn on the snap to. I'm going to delete that object just to make it a little bit easier to see what I'm doing here. I'm going to purposefully misplace this a little bit high here. I'm then going to hold down my Shift key and select multiple of these. And now that I have, let's say, 4 of these, I'm going to window around these and position these like so. Now, again, I happen to have multiple of these on the screen. 10, let's say I got 8 of these on the screen. I'm going to window around these and select all of these objects. Just do a brief check to make sure that I have little handles on all of them. Yes, I do. Notice that this one is the last selected object, so they're going to all reference this if I do an alignment. Maybe I don't want that. Maybe I want this object to be. I don't have to unselect everything to do that. Maybe it was a little tedious to do this selection. I can hold down the Shift key, double click, and deselect that object, and then maybe still holding down the Shift key, deselect this object, and now holding down the Shift key, select this one, and then select this one. That makes that one the reference point. So I can change which one I reference in that way. Now what I want to do is I want to align all of these to the top of this object. So I'll go here to align top. So now they're all aligned to the top. And now what I can do is I can do this evenly distribute horizontally. Now what that'll do is it'll take the leftmost object, the rightmost object, divide it up and evenly distribute these. And what you may notice, let me go see if I can undo this here, that object at the right actually moved a little bit, and the reason it did that is because of an odd number or even number of pixels it needed to be able to distribute those, so it pulled that in a little bit. So take that into consideration when you're doing that. Let's talk about now. We've pretty much covered all the different alignment tools. We talked about grouping a little bit, alignment, grid settings. I've been right-clicking to turn on and off the grid settings, but you can do that here in the graphics tab as well. And then here's the undo feature as well. And alternatively, you can get to the properties this way. So if I have an object behind another object, let's say, that I can't get to selected, instead of hitting Alt and Enter, you can actually click on this as well, and that'll get you to the properties. Now let's talk a little bit about combining some objects to maybe help you create a look and feel. One of the things that I've done is I've used a rounded rectangle and maybe changed the radius of this in this way, and then taken an ellipse and put it over the top of this, and maybe use some of my tools to get the right sizes here. But I can do that and create a pretty nice looking tank, let's say, and then maybe I can put a rectangle over the top of this and change its color. Let's say we'll change its fill color to black. And then I know we haven't talked about animations yet, but at this point I could then make that a bar graph and then show the tank level. Alternatively, or very similar, what I might do to create a pipe, let's say, is change that radius on the end here, and then put an ellipse on the end of this. That might make this look like a pipe. And again, using some of the tools, let's say I drew that and it was a little bit of the wrong size. There, it's a little bit too tall. I can hold down my Shift key and select this rounded rectangle. Then I can use my format and tell it I want to resize. I want both of those to be the same height. And now that gives me the exact same height as that, and I might change my radius to make it then look like a pipe. And you can maybe put an arrow on top of here and show flow, things of that nature. Another idea to combine multiple objects might be lines. Let's say, for example, so if I draw some lines, let's say I've got this bar graph here, I might draw a line and copy it down a couple of times, and then I'll hold down my Control key and position this and maybe make some intermediate scales here. Notice that I accidentally grabbed my tank here, so I'm going to delete that. Click on that, and I did it once again. Now, because I'm accidentally grabbing that, I want to show you a different way to possibly do this here. What I might do is move that tank out of the way so I have no object behind there. And I might use some of my zoom tools and zoom in on those to be able to do that. So there's maybe a way that you can create a scale, let's say. Now, another thing that I want to show you is combining rectangles. Rectangles have some different formatting associated with them. Let me move this pipe out of here. Let me select multiple of the multiple objects there and then group, and so I can get that pipe out of the way here. Make this rectangle a little bit bigger. Rectangle, if you take a look at the border, we have some kind of unique borders. There's a raised and a sunken and an etched. I'm going to choose a raised border. I'm going to choose a fill color that's kind of this medium gray here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of this rectangle and kind of inset it a little bit in here. And what I might do is give myself just a little bit of space here and position this down. And because I have my snap to turned on, it's giving me some alignment there. And then what I'll do is I'll make this inset one sunken. And so now I can have a nice frame and put stuff in here that is maybe a group of things, maybe some buttons that are relevant to a particular function. And alternatively, I can select this back rectangle here, put a caption on it. Maybe this is mode-related functions for a machine, let's say. So I can do mode and then change my alignment. So rather than being in the middle of that, I can say it's top left. And so now I can have mode, and then I can put my buttons or different objects inside of here, and maybe some status lights or whatever the case may be, and it kind of frames that up really nice. So just doing some couple basic rectangles can give you some nice nice shapes out of that. So there's a lot of information about formatting and how to use the various tools. The key things I want you to kind of come away with is that you can align based on the reference point. You can select multiple objects, and hopefully you can make your graphics look the way that you want to. So thank you for your time. Hopefully you learned something. And as always, we want to make sure that you remember that you can go to these different online resources and get some more information. And I'd like to thank you for joining us, and hopefully you had a good time and learned something. Thanks, and have a great day.